All right, my friends, we are back with another amazing episode. I am so excited for you all to meet my friend, Pilar Gerasimo. She is incredible. And I first got to know her through her magazine called Experience Life. And I knew who she was, kind of followed her online. And then who knows when this was, maybe years later, I'm at Joe Polish's house and he's like, Mindy, do you know Pilar? And I was like, well, yes, I do, actually, even though we had never met. So I'm stoked to just catch up with her today. Can't wait for you all to get to know her as well. Pilar, welcome to the show.
Mindy, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure and an honor to be here with you after all these years.
I don't know about that, but we're going to get into it and see what you have been up to. So why don't you give us an idea of what you're doing now? Because Experience Life, like when I knew way back when you started that magazine, I was like, this is awesome. Like she is the founder of this magazine, editor-in-chief. I'm like, maybe I'd like to put out a magazine someday. How cool is that? So I would love for you to kind of catch us up to speed because you've done a whole lot of other stuff since then.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's about to start a magazine, I always tell like, let's sit down and talk a little bit about this before you pull that particular trigger.
Make sure you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting into. Well, and I will send you to a lot of folks may or may not know what Experience Life magazine is. But Experience Life magazine is this magazine. This is me on the cover, which I only did once. But the magazine has been around since 2001 when I launched it in partnership with Lifetime Fitness. And it was the first whole person healthy living magazine in existence that I'm aware of that reached a general mass audience. Yeah, I think so. And at the time, it was kind of a risky move. And the company was a little bit nervous about embracing this idea of whole person, whole life, health and fitness, also healthy living in a bigger picture, the context of our social, emotional, spiritual well-being. And, this is kind of the beginning of the story of everything that's happened since. When the magazine started, it was this kind of funky experiment. And I wasn't sure it was going to work. I was asking the company to invest millions of dollars in it. And thank goodness it worked out well. And it ended up reaching like 3 million people with each issue. It's still operating today and doing great. After doing that for 15 years, though, I really felt like I needed to do something different. And the short version of the story of my time since Experience Life is that I got hired by Arianna Huffington to be the top healthy living editor at Huffington Post, a position I held for, I say, like 5 hot minutes, because I went to New York, I went into that position, and I immediately found myself in the midst of a 24-hour digital news cycle with, I use the term clickbait generously, but truly a lot of what was beginning to happen at that point in like 2013 or so was this really intense escalation of the speed at which we were forcing people or inviting them to consume media. And it really struck me that the contrast between the quality of the material, the intention of that content, and what I had been doing previously was so dramatic that I just felt like there was a mission breakage there for me. I did not only did I not feel like I was doing what I was put here to do, but I felt like I was working against some of the things that I had been the most committed to doing, which was really helping people connect with the stuff that they need to know, not the stuff that they are like addicted to clicking on. And it's just like no harm, no foul. Huffington Post does great stuff, and I respect Arianna Huffington a lot. It just wasn't for me. And then became a process of figuring out like what is for me.
Yeah,
what next? What now? Yeah. So I think ever since then, I left there, I guess in 2013. I came back briefly to Experience Life to kind of help with the transition and a turnaround, because I had left the magazine, I think, in the wrong hands and the wrong leadership, and it just wasn't working. So we did that. And then I was able to kind of gracefully and graciously kind of pull myself back out to do the things I was excited about doing next, including when I met you at Joe Polish's house. I was there with Dallas Hartwig. We were for the Consumer Health Summit, I think. And Dallas and I were just beginning this podcast called The Living Experiment, which was a podcast all about what I was becoming increasingly passionate about, namely, how do you do this thing called being healthy and happy in the context of a world that does not make that easy, and in fact is mostly breaking people down most of the time. So we were both very interested in that. Dallas, for people who don't know, Dallas is the co-founder of the Whole30, New York Times bestselling author of that book, and another one called It Starts with Food, and then a new book called The 4-Season Solution. So Dallas and I were kind of like soul brother, sister And we loved doing that. The podcast became a kind of, I would call it like a intermediate project for us while we were both working on our books. By that time, I had started to write my book, The Healthy Deviant, which has been the kind of center of my universe ever since.
Which is
And
such a great title, by the way.
oh, thank you for saying that. I should say, I think so too. And a lot of publishers turned
Did
the
not.
book down. Nope, including a lot of publishers that you would think would get it, but they were like, was radioactive to them. And I think understandably, I get now why they were concerned about it, but I'm really happy with the title too. And I think it's very much for this time. The idea that basically, deviating from the norms that are not healthy and are not working for most people is a good thing. So it's a positive form of social deviance. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's been ever since kind of what I've been focused on, is how to get the word out about what I see as a really important alternative way of approaching not just health and fitness, but successful, gratifying living. What happened, interestingly though, was the book came out in 2020. I was doing a brief stint at the time. I did about a year-long stint at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition as their interim chief creative officer, which was a really interesting job, kind of in a transition phase for that organization. That's a health coaching, education, and certification company. I think the first and biggest in the world. And that was a really fun and interesting project, but I knew I was doing it until the book came out. So
Right.
book comes out in January of 2020.
Right before COVID.
Just in time for COVID to kill the book tour and to kill every other revenue generating project that I had planned. So I had paid talks, I had 6-figure consulting contracts lined up, I had a whole fleet of plans to travel to beautiful far-flung destinations for conferences and retreats, all of which died a very sudden death. And that's really where I think the story of what I'm doing now begins. But I'll pause there and say, that's what I've been doing since we last saw each other.
Okay, well, that is awesome, because what fertile ground, right? Like, I had different but similar experience in that Sean had just passed away in 2019. And then it's like, I'm still in this grieving experience. And then 2020 and COVID, I'm like, are you kidding? Like, what? Seriously? Like, how many more things? First I lose my husband, and then now we're all going to die because of this virus. So that was absolutely bananas. But I love that we can start the deeper conversation there, because what the heck do you do when that happens? Like, all of that stuff that you had set up, your financial, viability, everything was like, go, let's rock this book, what a huge like birthing into the world, and then crashed. So can you talk to me about how you felt a little bit during that time? Because I think everybody on this thing will resonate in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I know, I don't think there's any person whose life was untouched by the events of 2020 and beyond. What happened for me was interesting in that beyond the first angst that I had was just that, oh my God, I spent 5 years of my life working on this book.
Yeah.
I don't mean, this is not like a chat GPT type of book. This was not like a 6 ways to do something book. This was a book where I delved deep into what I saw as like the truth of being alive today, shared my own experience. The book has like 5 parts. It's really well researched. I mean, I invested time, money, love in this process. So I was so enthusiastic about getting out there and talking about it that the first grief wasn't financial. The first grief was, what about the 5 years of my life that just like, this is going to go down the tubes? Is this not going to go anywhere? The second reaction I had, I think, so this was like March 14th or 15th, that like the shutdown we thought was going to be a couple of weeks long started. Remember that, when we thought it was like, oh, a couple of weeks,
Right. We'll be great. See you,
we're
like,
all gonna have a little
next month.
Staycation time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So around, I think, April, when I maybe at the middle of that shutdown period, I was like, well, I need to do something. I can't just sit here, and I want to do something to help. I was going to go bonkers sitting around my house, and I thought everyone else was going to go bonkers. And I realized, hey, in my book, there's a 14-day program called the Healthy Deviant Adventure.
Perfect.
Why not figure out a way to make that available to people? So, as a free gift to the world of people sitting at home, twiddling their thumbs, probably burning a lot of high-speed internet, I spontaneously and probably stupidly launched a 14-day live daily program running on Zoom, which I had, to be honest, other than a few meetings that I had done, like remote telecommuting, I'd never used Zoom. I'd never used Zoom for webcasting. No webinars. I'd never run a webinar. I didn't know anything about that.
This is
And
hilarious.
oh, Minnie, it was just like, I was calling up my friends in the functional medicine community, like Uli Iserlo, and just saying like, how do you run Zoom? Like, how do you do this?
How does this work?
How do you do this? But the good news is, because I had no idea what I was doing, there was no business model for it. I wasn't charging people anything. More than 1,000 people signed up for this thing. And
Nice.
every day I would just go live with messy hair, with no big plan. All of the like visual aids I had were on pieces of white paper. And I was like, it's day 2.
Here we go.
Here's the theme. And I would just talk. I would like read the passage and then I would explain what it meant. And I would ask people like, what do you think? And then there's experiments that are attached to each day in the program, like actual things to try and do, which was perfect for that environment because people had time and space to do those things. So the response to it was so lovely and so encouraging. And so many people from days like 10 through 14 were like, this is amazing. And I just want to keep doing this. This is making a huge difference for me. Like, how can I just keep going? I don't know. So that was
it's like, what else you got, Pilar?
That's exactly literally what they would say. Like, what else do you have?
Yeah.
Because I was kind of a reluctant, broadcaster of, and I had no e-commerce model at all. I was like, I don't know what else I got in the hopper. I wasn't ready to turn anything else in the book into a program yet, but I had a 6-week program called Refine Your Life or Change It Completely that I had created as a 6-week in-person program back when I was, at Lifetime and doing Experience Life. And I was like, I think I could turn that into an online program. So again, with no knowledge of how to do that, I ran it live. I didn't know how to record, edit video. I didn't know.
I love this story so much.
I mean, it was so like cottage industry level, amateur hour. Yes. And this is where the financial part of the story gets kind of interesting. I can't remember. I think I priced it at a few $100 and just hoped somebody would sign up for it. And at this point, I was just like, I'm going to have to live off my savings. Like, there's no way. And I didn't have a ton of savings because my life had been a little bit disrupted and I'd changed jobs a few times. And, but to my absolute delight and shock, a lot of people signed up, not millions of people, but a number of people, enough people signed up that it was like a 5-figure launch. Nice. I think it maybe made, I don't know, like $18,000 or $20,000 or something like that, which was enough to have me be able to see for the next few months that I was going to be able to pay my bills and take care of my obligations and my family and my dog and, do that, just figure it out. And no one really knew exactly what else was going to happen then. So at the end, so the 6-week program went smashingly. Like, people were blown away. Their lives changed. They reported the kinds of results that most of the programs promise to produce, but often don't. Like, it's going to change your life. You're going to lose weight. You're going to blah, blah, blah. I didn't make any of those promises other than it's a really fun program that helped me change my life. And I made it because I needed to change my life, and it worked, and it's worked for other people. Maybe it will work for you. At the end of that program, same thing. People are like, this is amazing. Now I've spent 6-8 weeks with you. I want to spend way more time with you. How can we keep going? And at that point, I was like, I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to research it. I talked to a few people, and I ran into Stu McLaren's program, which is about developing membership programs. And I was sort of like, I think that that's kind of what these folks are talking about. They want to hang out and do this work on an ongoing basis. So then I started creating this weird hybrid, I think it is, of a curriculum and a membership. And at the end of Refine Your Life or Change It Completely, the 6-week program, I said, listen, I'm thinking about doing this. How many of you would be interested in doing it? And enough people sounded interested, and they were interesting people.
Yes, I'm sure.
I said, okay, I'll make it happen. And from that point on, which was, I don't know, I guess summer, fall of 2020, I began building this plane as I was flying it. And for the next year, pretty much a week at a time, I built out course content, 24 modules of recorded content, videos, workbooks, game boards, badges. I mean, like I had all of the little things,
Nice.
and it just developed. It took a year to build, but people just stuck with me through it. And every week there would be new content, and we'd have live sessions. There was a Facebook group. There still is. I'm describing this like it's dead. It's happening still,
It's on.
2023. Yeah. And people who joined then, a lot of them are still members now, which is
Nice.
kind of mind blowing to me. But I still feel like a piker at this. I don't feel like I'm a great e-commerce person. I personally feel like I'm terrible at marketing. I don't like talking about like, buy my stuff. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. As a journalist, I also feel like my credibility is at stake. I don't want to make overblown promises. I don't want to bait and switch people, which I feel like is a lot of what sells digital programs right now. So I kind of entered as a reluctant player in this space. And I just decided from the beginning, I'm not going to do the things that make me feel weird. And that has been both to my benefit, in that I feel like I've been completely in integrity in what I've been doing. And it's been to my detriment in that I feel like I've undersold a lot of what I've done. And fiscally, I probably haven't produced the kinds of results that I could, my people who I now know in e-commerce are like, this is $1 million thing. Why are you you're sleeping on this? Get on it. Come on. And I'm just like, so I would say I'm midway or partially in this baby steps into this journey, and still learning every day and figuring out how to make it work. And also on my own financial journey, because some other interesting things happened during that time, namely that, so 2020 to 2021, I was heavily involved in learning how to edit video and starting a hub and figuring out how software as a service works and how to set up a
All the
cart.
things.
Yeah. And having to hire people to help me with the things I'm not good at or don't know how to do. And that became very expensive. And, my business was like break even to not quite break even those first couple of years. And then in 2022, last year, it was sort of the year you had. Like my stepfather died quite suddenly, leaving my mom, who's in her 80s, widowed. He was also really central to my life, had been the main figure, like father figure for me for the past, 40 years. So it was
Wow.
hugely grieving. He died at home in hospice. So we had been taking care of him for a period of time. I was with him when he died,
Mm.
personally alone. And being with someone when they die is a really intense experience. So all of that was happening. And then 6 weeks later, my partner of 8 years decided to leave our relationship, which was devastating
Oh,
because
that just gave me the chills.
yeah. And we had been living together because of COVID. We hadn't decided to move in together prior to that, but we'd made that decision. So our lives were quite merged. That was really distressing. And then a few months later, my dog died, who I'd had for 10 years. And in the middle of all of that, my business was becoming I knew that this was now what I was going to do. I wasn't going to go back and get another job. At least I wasn't my plan at the moment. I was like, I think I need to get good at this, but I was trying to get good at it from a place of having nothing in the tank. And thank God my members and students are just like, I was very transparent with them the whole time this was going on, and they were wonderful and understanding, and they stuck with me. And so now I feel like I'm in this sort of third phase of this. And it's been really hard because I will say a lot of the pandemic PPP type support and EIDL support that got a lot of small businesses through, I really wasn't eligible for because I was starting my business in 2020, and unexpectedly so. So I hadn't arranged financing for liquidity or capital. I hadn't, a business plan, and I couldn't show previous results from this business to any of these folks to say I'm losing.
It wasn't there.
No, I'd had a job the year before. So I just ended up in this really ugly little pothole in the middle of all of that support traffic. And I had to kind of bail myself out, which looked like for me, eating through my life savings, tapping into my retirement, having to radically change my lifestyle. So the good news was there wasn't a lot I could do during the first 2 years. I wasn't going anywhere, wasn't going on any cruises or anything. But it really did make me reflect on what is important to me? What can I live without? What am I happy to live without? Where should I and where can I invest in myself? And how can I enroll people who believe in me to help me make this happen? And we can talk more about that, but that's kind of what happened to me and how I became a reluctant e-commerce business owner.
Pilar, this is the most incredible story to me because I kid you not, in so many ways, you're telling my story. So
Hey,
many parallels. I mean, first and foremost, I want to highlight a couple of things that you just talked about because super important for all of you listeners out there to recognize most of us don't have a clue what we're doing most of the time. We are making it up as we go. Sometimes it works out, sometimes not so much. And like you just got to go with it, figure out. And I loved what you talked about where your people kept saying, okay, what's next? I had that similar experience of like just doing something that was based on what I wanted to do, what I felt like I was called to do, what I was here to do. And then they'd be like, all right, great. What's next? Like, what else? I'm like, there is nothing else, but I guess I can make something up. Cool. And then that just like transformed into other programs and other things. Also, same experience when Sean passed away, we had already started a membership group. And then those people were so just like, Mindy, take all the time you need. We're here.
wow.
And I was like, I mean, that like makes my eyes water now saying it because it's so just like, we got you. It's all good. Figure yourself out. We'll still be here when you get back. And it's so powerful, like that sense of community. So in even like all that shit is going wrong in your life. And yet that community was like holding you up. I had the same exact experience and it's so, so powerful. And all of that came from just something that we made up because some people asked for it. So absolutely amazing. Here's what I want to ask you, because I know that both I and lots of our listeners resonate with the idea of like, we do not like the whole marketing, sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What have you found that is either who you are or close enough to who you are that doesn't feel absolutely gross to talk about? Like, how do you sell your stuff?
Yeah. Well, this is a really timely question because I am recognizing, I mean, and this is stuff I think Joe Polished, our mutual friend, talks about all the time. Like people who, I'm going to start over and say, people who are good at marketing make a very good and convincing case why marketing is a generous and friendly thing to do.
Yes.
If you have a good product, telling people about it and helping them find it is a good and generous, friendly thing to do. That said, in the health and fitness industry, it is also true that for people for whom exercise comes easily, for example, people who are naturally athletic, it's very easy for them to say to people who are not naturally athletic, it's great, just start, you're going to love it, it's going to feel better. It's so difficult to put yourself into the position of a person who is just expressing into the world differently than you are. I think it's really important to honor the fact that it may be a friendly and generous thing to do. That does not necessarily make it easier for someone like you or like me to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons we have to surround ourselves with a community of people who are good at things that we are not good at. And I have, in many cases, had to rely on other people for the most basic advice and basic encouragement of like, it's okay to send people email. Like I had an email list of 9,000 people I had not emailed in 4 years. I mean, I just kind of collected emails like I was collecting pennies in a jar. I didn't do anything.
Oh my God,
them.
I love this.
Because I kept coming against this thing of like, people get too much email. I get too much email. I don't want to clutter someone's box, like, and particularly I don't want to clutter their box with a, like, I got something for you. Like you have to act now. And a lot of those strategies, I will say, honestly, I just am not comfortable with them. Like a certain amount of urgency that's relative to like, hey, the program is opening tomorrow. You might want to get in on it.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. But this endless manipulation of people, like, hey, if it works for you and you can do it comfortably and you can sleep at night and it doesn't give you this like skeevy, weird feeling, cool. But I will tell you, I have signed up for no fewer than 13 marketing programs, and I get every single time about 4 modules in. And then I'm like, I'm out. I don't think I can do it like this. I mean, and I'm talking about like recently.
Yeah, I get it.
I mean, so I don't know that I have the answer to that. I think I will say for me, the things that have worked that I've been comfortable with are good advice for me was like, you know what, when you do email, people really like hearing from you, and they open these emails, and many of them will thank me for sending the emails. And I'm a little apologetic, like, hey, I know I'm showing up in your inbox. And they're like, you know what, thank you so much, because you gave me something to think about, or I realize now I do want to do this. And so I've had to overcome some discomfort to look at how I act, and then to be able to truly feel that I am delivering some value in those messages has been very important for me. I will say I still struggle with frequency. I probably could be emailing 10 times as often as I am, with way more offers than I am, and I'm not doing that. Going to people who have already been in my programs and offering them something else, or the next step, has been easy for me too, because I'm like, if you like it, here's another thing.
Here's
Without pressuring them. Yeah. And like I said, with Healthy Deviant You, which is the program that I launched off of, the membership program is called Healthy Deviant You. And it's sort of designed for people who want to learn how to master the art of what I talk about in my book and practice it with a group of people over the course of a year, as long as they want anyway. That was an easy offer to make, because I could see that it was a natural continuation of an experience they were already having that was good. The biggest challenge, though, for me is like scaling a successful set of programs to a larger audience, growing my audience, borrowing audiences. Borrowing audiences, I think, works really well for me if I can get myself to the point that I'm, it's easy for me to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm invited to do it, great. Pitching myself, not so great. And that will get us into another conversation I would actually love to have with you about the patriarchy. If there are women business owners out there, and how it works for women versus how it works for men, because that is something I have definitely seen and witnessed in the past few years. So I will say one other thing that happened recently was I was at an e-commerce conference giving a talk. Ezra Firestone, who's like a major big league internet marketer guy, he has a mastermind called Blue Ribbon, which is just packed with like some of the country's and world's best e-marketers, like people who worry about like how to make the next $10 million, those people. And I'm just like, can you help me figure out how to, yeah. But one of the guys there came up after I gave my talk, which was really more in the realm of health and self-management and maintaining your energy and attention and stuff. And he said, I really liked your talk, and I would love to talk with you about what you do, and I'm interested in your stuff. We ended up doing a little trade, and I helped him think through how to do a course he was interested in doing that was very personal to him. And he offered to help me with Facebook ads. Long story short, I still have never run a Facebook ad. I've never run any paid ad. I have no idea if I will ever do that, because what happened with that, he gave me straight up awesome advice. I got to about phase 4, and it was like, okay, now you're going to build this web page, and it's your offer and your web page are going to look like this. I took one look at the sample web pages, and I was like, I'll get back to you on that. Thank you. And saw the same things that give me a rash every time they show up. And it's like, you don't have to have it be this ugly. It doesn't have to be that gross. Yours is going to be awesome. You can do it your own way. But the basic gist of a lot of these funnels requires, kind of like I saw what was happening at Huffington Post, a certain amount of like hype to get people to break through the clutter that people are already experiencing in their minds. My whole job is helping people reduce the clutter.
The opposite.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the opposite.
I can't leverage a lot of the strategies that I'm sure do work because they're anathema. Very much like with Experience Life magazine back in the day, what I was told was, hey, you can make this magazine worth 10 times the value of its current, revenue. You need a lady with a bikini. You need lose the flab in 13 days or 870 moves for a hot upper body. Legitimately an actual cover line that I sometimes share from an actual magazine. I could not do that then. I cannot do it now. And it will probably cost me millions of potential dollars over my business's lifetime. And I'm still figuring it out. I might change my mind about some of these things, but I think at essence, I have to market in ways that sit with my mission and my vision and my values. And some of those don't work very well with the strategies that I'm being told to use. So I'm having to navigate and find my own way, which guess what? Deviance is one of the
Yes.
hallmarks of what I do. So I'm finding new and different ways, which is kind of fun. We can talk more about creative ways of getting about this, but like I said, I'm still in the baby phase. So those are some things that have worked for me more easily, and also some places I've run into real kind of roadblocks. I'm
I
really interested in hearing
totally,
about yours.
well, I totally get it because Joe Polish used to make fun of us all the time. He'd be like, all right, you guys, why are you like the head of the sales prevention team over here? Because we'd be like, Joe, like, how do we do this in our business? And he'd be like, hello, like, why are you
Sounds
blocking
good.
this? And
Hmm.
our accountant, who you probably know because he's also in this like our community, he would always just shake his head at us. He's like, why don't you guys have $1 million business?
Yeah.
And Sean and I would be like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, we're surrounded by other people that do, and
Yeah.
we never got there.
Yeah.
But it's because of exactly all the stuff you are talking about. So once again, I'm like, yes, same story. I get it. Parallel tracks. Like we are in these communities of people just doing like big, 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 huge, massive things.
Yeah.
And you said like, oh, and it might cost me, in my business. But here's what it's not going to cost you. It's not going to cost you your authenticity. It's not going to
Mm-hmm.
cost you like who you truly are. And
Yeah.
you probably, like me, get an inside perspective at some of these very, 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 very successful people's lives, like their
Yeah.
inner lives.
Yeah.
And they're not always so hot, right? I mean, I
Nope.
used to have this program called Rich at Work, Broke at Heart, because it's like
Yeah.
exterior, they were the shit. Like they had it going on, they had the money, the whatever, everything.
Yeah.
And they would come to me as a coach and they were freaking miserable. So I'm like, let's
Yeah.
work on that. Like, let's clean up the inside stuff so that it can match, all
Yeah.
this lovely stuff you have going on outside. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, I so understand. So here's what I want to ask you is, apart from the marketing, sales, all that, because I think that stuff is external.
Yeah.
What do you, and I'm super curious about this, even like for myself, what do you think it is within us? And when I say us, I'm you, me, Sean is in that category, like was in
Yeah.
that category. People that I know, that are struggling with this. What is it on the inside that maybe causes us or just has such a pull on us to not venture into some of these territories, even when we have people like, here's the Facebook ad, here's the this, here, helping us
Yeah.
along the way. We just are very resistant.
Minnie, that is such a great question. I have thoughts on that. I have sort of, I'm gonna frame it in two ways. Okay, so the first way is kind of the classic. What are your internal mindset money blocks? Your belief systems about money, what you learned as a child. I grew up with parents, frankly, who were very much questioning commercial consumeristic values. I'm a child of the 60s. There was a huge movement back then toward voluntary simplicity, which ultimately became what we call minimalism now. But there was a really interesting period when I was in my, like, I guess, teens and 20s, where I'd already kind of like whatever my parents had taught me about all of that, I'd rejected. And I was like, are you kidding me? Money looks great to me. Like we grew up with pretty simple, but not impoverished lifestyle, but like we didn't have a lot of excess stuff and we did okay. Like we were happy, we got educated somehow. Today it would be harder to educate 3 kids, but my dad was a college professor. So I felt like I had seen evidence of it's possible to have a good life without being money obsessed or having a ton of money. And at some point in my late teens, early 20s, I was like, well, do I want to live that way or do I want to live a different way? I wanted to give a shot to sort of making some money. And I
Nice.
went about doing that. I ultimately I kind of got to the place where my jobs were $250,000 jobs with stock options. And I felt flush for the first time in my life. Starting the magazine, gave me an opportunity to get a little piece of business. And some things went my way, other things not so much. But I kind of discovered at that point, having money doesn't make me a bad person. Actually, having money gives me a lot of opportunities to be more generous, to be more flexible, to be more experimental, to have a safety net so I can try some stuff and help some people, invest in projects that matter to me, leave jobs that don't feel like they're good for me. I described that feeling. I couldn't have done that if I hadn't had some cushion. And, people can I swear on this podcast or do you
Please
not
do.
swear?
Please do.
Okay. I had a series of conversations with a girlfriend of mine who is also a creative about the importance of having a fuck you fund.
Yeah,
Where
absolutely. Yes.
you can say, nah, I'm not going to do that. And at various points in my life, I felt like I had to leverage that fund, and I'm glad I had it. So that's the belief systems. What are those limiting factors? One is, yes, I learned from my parents, money can be the source of some evil. Undoubtedly, that was, and I'll be fair, I do believe that's true. I do believe that people chasing money without a view to some other and really important values, it gets very perverted and twisted very quickly.
But don't you think
and
that's the person, not the money?
yeah, I do. But I think that the nature of our culture, which is what I'm going to talk about next, is what twists the
I get
people.
it.
Yeah. And I do think that there is, I mean, money is a kind of an imaginary thing. The way we have it in our culture, it isn't the same kind of value holding and like entity that we grew up, I won't say we grew up with, ancestrally. What we learned about what creates and destroys value, what supports and detracts from quality of life, had nothing to do with money. It had to do with skill. And it had to, like, can you hunt? Can you gather? Can you build a house? Can you skin a thing? Can you, figure out what the weather is going to do and avoid being pummeled by that? So this gets to the second part of my thing. We are living in a culture right now that I would say post-agricultural revolution, 10,000 years, but post-industrial revolution, 200. Tiny, tiny bit of time compared to the 2.5 million years we spent in hunter-gatherer existence, learning to live together in communities where things were shared, because that was the only way for us to survive. The way that we're living now is an experiment. This is why Dallas and I had a podcast called The Living Experiment, and why I'm teaching this art of learning how to live better in the world that we're living in now, because we're the first generation in the history of humanity to be facing the intersecting factors that we are technologically, economically, socially, environmentally. And I really think we lose perspective that when we start talking about money, and we do have this, like, it's money isn't the root of all evil. It's people, it's like guns don't kill people, like people kill people. Okay, true. And what we've learned about how to use these different tools, monies, guns, atomic bombs, whatever, we don't have a lot of runway to have learned. We don't have a lot of, past experience to have taught us how to relate in healthy ways with it. And that's why I think so many of the models of money having people we've seen are not happy creation situations. I too have seen millionaires and billionaires, more than I'd care to describe, who not only are not happy, but they're not producing happy results for other people with their projects. And that to me is an interesting conundrum. I think it's wonderful to make plenty of money and to have enough abundance to have options, to have choices, to be able to help other people out. But if you're accumulating money as a proof of your value as a human being, or as a source of controlling other people, or having more than you need or even want, and it's just the game, I don't know that that's a great thing, because at some point, the way our money system is designed, it tends to lead to really unfortunate results. And it's a longer conversation, the whole philosophy of money. We could dig into deeper if you want to. In your hands, in my hands right now, I feel like more money would be enormously helpful. Like, I could actually be able to reach more people with the stuff that I do see that works. I'm not cheating people. I'm not stealing from people. I'm not accumulating vast sums of wealth in order to, like, hide myself away on a little island where nothing touches me and everyone else can suffer. I'm okay because I've got a vault. Like, that mindset is not good for people. It's not good for us collectively. And that, for me, is a big part of my value system. I care about the larger whole. I want to be in a world where everybody is doing better, not just me. And I know that that's true of people like Joe and, a lot of the other folks that
our community.
Yeah. But how we make that happen is going to be different. And I will say, this is the last thing I'll say about this. I think it's really important for us all to recognize the value of each other's voices in this, and to listen to each other, and not assume that just because somebody is making millions and millions and millions of dollars and can churn the crank to produce more of it whenever they want, that their opinion about this is more right or more valuable than the opinion of people potentially like you and me who are like, I struggle with this.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's wrong or right about it. I think both are true, and we need to hear from each other more.
Yeah, such a powerful point. And I mean, there's a reason why in the 4 agreements, one of those agreements is do not make assumptions. It's like all this stuff
Yes.
that we see on social media or whatever. I'm like, just stop looking at it. Like it's
Yeah.
not helping you at all. So just
No.
why go there? So one of these questions that I ask every guest on this show, I can't wait to hear what your response is going to be, but how do you personally define wealth?
Oh. Wealth to me equates to abundance and a feeling of plenty. That for me is a sense of ease and flexibility and integrity in my systems. So feeling that I can make the choices that I want to make for myself, have autonomy, agency, freedom. That's really what wealth is about. All the money in the world doesn't buy it, but not having any money will really tend to detract from your ability to have those things. And those things matter to me.
And why? Because you just said it a few times, that word feeling. When you don't have any money, that causes a certain feeling. When you
Yes, it
have
does.
money, that is that, I love what you said, the feeling of abundance, then
Mhm.
it is that feeling that is your wealth. That's amazing. I would love to dig in on some detailed things in your life, just so our listeners can understand maybe how you go about doing the things you do, or what are
Mm.
some of the things that have helped you create the things that you've created. So I
Yeah.
have this 4-part question. It's based on an acronym, HERB, and I'll walk you through each part. The H stands for habits. What are some of your personal habits that allow you to stay in that integrity that you talked about, stay in that creative, bubble that you like to be in? What habits
Yeah.
help that?
Yeah. Well, there's the three that are the most central to my life, are the renegade rituals, I call them. And I write about them in my book and I podcast about them. I'll tell anybody about them for free anytime. The first one is called the morning minutes practice. And that is when I get up, I spend at least the first 3 minutes, often much longer, without encountering any digital media, any news, anything having to do with the outside world, any even chargy conversations with people in my midst. I try to spend the first 3 minutes coming to waking gradually. Scientific reasons for this are many, but primarily like your brain is in a in between sleeping and waking state called the theta state. It's an incredibly powerful state of your brain being kind of connected to your subconscious, but also connected to your conscious. So it's a great time to set intentions, to check in with yourself, to harvest creative ideas that came up overnight, to envision how you want your day to go. And the only rule I have for myself is in those first few minutes, sometimes 3, 15, 20, sometimes 30, I only do things that I genuinely find pleasurable and appealing. I don't force myself to exercise if I don't feel like exercising. I might, take my dog for a walk or play my guitar or do yoga or meditate, but I give myself permission to do whatever feels appealing on that particular day. And this
Nice.
is a really interesting exercise because oftentimes we get into this rhythm of just doing the thing and we don't ever get to tap into like, what do I actually want today? What does my body feel like today? What do I have
What would
energy
bring me
for?
joy?
Yeah. So that's the first habit. The second one is called ultradian rhythm breaks. And ultradian is like ultra, dia meaning day. So ultra many dea, many times a day. There's a rhythm your body goes through. This rhythm, ultradian rhythms are like circadian rhythms, but shrunk down. So instead of once a day on a 24-hour cycle, circadian rhythms, ultradian rhythms happen many times throughout the day. And basically you have energy peaks and you have energy troughs. And I am a student of when those peaks and troughs occur. Every 90 minutes or so, you have like a lovely peak and then you have a 20-minute trough.
Is
It's
that
just
based
programmed
on,
in.
what is that based on? Hormonal levels, or what is it?
No, it's part of our clock genes. It's
Hmm.
programmed into just like your heart rhythms,
Mhm.
and like eye blinking, sinus rhythms, the things that they measure. If you're like go unconscious, they're like, we've got sinus rhythms.
Right.
It's just like that.
Huh.
So it's a programmed thing. Everybody has it. It changes a little bit in pregnancy. It can change, a little bit according to different seasons and things, but generally speaking, everybody has it. Babies to old people. So does every plant and animal that they've ever studied.
Cool.
It's really interesting. Yeah. So we don't learn about this, but in fact, if you become interested, and I have one of the podcasts we did on this is called Pause. I can send you the link if you're interested.
Yeah,
Or
I'll
it's
link
like I
it
said,
for all the
yeah.
listeners as well.
And I have a blog about it called All About Ultradian Rhythms, which is a pretty solid roundup with illustrations and things that people might actually like better. I think I've become like one of the world's top advocates for this, even though I'm not a scientist. I'm a journalist and I studied the science a lot. And I think I just explain it in more simple terms for people. But
you're a translator for all those scientists. It's like, here's what's going on.
Yeah. And I think each of us knows it because we go to work at, like, so you start at 9 a.m, about 10:30, you're starting to feel like you're dragging a little. And then people go for sugar and caffeine, or they start to get distracted, or they just force themselves to keep going. And it has really negative consequences for every system in the body: digestive, neurological, immunological, and from a mental health perspective, hugely important for mood and behavior stuff. It's interestingly, now they're studying it for people with type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's. Like, it really has a big impact on our functionality. So that is a habit I have, of paying attention to my ultradian rhythms, respecting them, building breaks in throughout my day. And then the final one, probably not hard to guess, is my nighttime wind down routine. So I have a practice for going into my day, a practice for getting through my day, and a practice for decelerating my day.
Nice.
And the nighttime wind down is can be anywhere for me from 15 to 45 minutes. And it's just about literally bringing everything down: the pace, the rhythm, the temperature in my home, the volume of anything I'm listening to. I shut down computers and electronics. And I do some really simple things, like I call them, it's a strange word, but I call them evening ablutions. Part of my nighttime wind down practice is that when I'm doing, like, taking off my makeup or brushing my teeth, or I just do it slowly and with like a very loving touch. And
I
just
love
kind
that.
of
Just
calm
like
my body
gently.
down. Like I treat myself like a sacred object. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's
I love all those things. Especially, I love when I'm like, wait, I've never even heard of that stuff that you're talking about. And I love that because, like, I research a lot of stuff. So this is awesome.
I have a standalone class on it, and I will send you the link to it. It's just a presentation. I do like a mini course.
Yeah, I'm totally into it.
Yeah, it's a great way. Honestly, I don't know why people, even in medical school, they really don't teach it. And doctors and nurses desperately need to understand it because they're all killing themselves right now, taking no breaks whatsoever.
Right.
But it's fundamentally as important as any other heart rhythm type thing you pay attention to. And they love tracking that stuff, but nobody pays attention to URBs, as I call them, ultradian rhythm breaks.
Huh. Yeah. Well, like I said, I freaking love it. So the E in herb stands for environment. Yeah. How do you set up your environment, your space, whether that be home, office, car, whatever, so that you can be aware of those rhythms in yourself, and so that you can create and do all the things that you want to do in a day? Yeah. Ooh, that's a really important one. Well, as you can probably tell, environment matters a lot to me. And the studio that I'm in now, I built just a few years ago because I realized I really was influenced by my environment. My home, which I love, is right next door to the studio, but it's a passive solar home that's designed to stay pretty dark in the winter. So it stays cold in there. I don't have any air conditioning in it. The downside is that I don't work well. I can't create well in environments that are dark and low, like the ceilings in my office in there are low. So I learned that I need to have that. I need light and air, and I need like space to be able to think. I also use the walls a lot for like big pieces of paper when I'm, when I was writing my book. I'm the same way. I have like a million of those all around here. I need walls, and none of my walls were big enough in my house. So I learned to kind of respect my creative needs and appetites and meet those needs, almost like a nutritional need. Yeah. Some of the other things that are really important to me, I will say my sister Andrea is a feng shui consultant, and she helped me also really understand how to set up systems so that there was less friction in anything I was doing, whether it was making coffee
or taking my dog for a walk, like having a place for things and things in their place. I'm not good at this, mind you. My tendency is a little bit more chaotic and cluttered. I don't even
I
want to show
understand.
you the space around here. It looks like my desk back there is clean, but I only use that desk for like computer work, and then I take the thing off. So I have a very cluttered paperwork desk that I just allow to be creative chaos. That's part of my respecting my own system. One of the fundamentally biggest deals for me, though, is my bedroom. I keep my bedroom pretty clear of everything that does not need to be in there, and I try to bring beauty into that room. I like bringing beauty and flowers into all my spaces, but my bedroom, the rules are there is no television, no electronics. I don't bring my phone in there. I don't leave my phone plugged in there. I have an alarm clock that's completely separate. It is electrical, but it's like a sunrise alarm clock. I have a Zen alarm clock. And I don't allow things to build up in there. There's not 15 books on the bedside. There's not laundry on the floor. I need to sleep in a space that feels like a temple, or I don't sleep well. So I allow that. And even if the rest of my house goes to hell in a handbasket, which it does periodically, particularly during launches. Oh my God, or book writing. Sure. So I do that. I try to create kind of zones of Zen peacefulness and clarity where I feel that they're the most essential to me, without being anal retentive and trying to turn myself into someone that I'm not. I kind of like a certain amount of creative chaos. I leave things on, I've like all kinds of random, index cards. Like, I write it, hang it up. They just pile up. Every once in a while I go through and kind of organize them. But yeah, I think that the basic principle there is know who you are, know what you need to function well. And the systems that I set up are typically around the things that I have to do or want to do every day. Not everything in my life is set up like that, but just the ones that I know I'm going to waste a ton of time and energy on a daily basis if I don't have them set up well. This is a silly example, but my sister Andrea observed me making coffee one day, and she's just like watching me walk back and forth across the kitchen to make coffee. And she's like, why do you keep your filters over there when your machine is there? And why do you have your machine there when your sink is there? And when you're saying, why is your coffee over there? And the stir, I mean, I was making like a mile trip.
Yes, for like.
So she changed that round, and my whole day felt like so much better.
It's true. When you can decrease friction in any one of those things, it does help everything else. So yeah, totally appreciate that. The R in herb stands for resources. Resources could be books, programs, coaches, whatever, anything that has greatly impacted you. And I will say that like you resonate with, because we already talked about marketers and whatever. Yeah. But what resources have really impacted you that you might recommend to our audience?
Well, this is interesting. So Maria Popova writes
yes,
brain
I love
pickings
it.
thing.
I love it.
And I really find both the things that she chooses to share in her newsletter, which is now called Marginalia, and the way that she chooses to share, her generosity. She is more of a marketer like you and me. Interesting. Yeah. Today, just as an experiment, I've been a subscriber. It's a volunteer. You can get her in her newsletter free. But she asks, if you're willing to support her work, which is how one way she makes her living is through these donations, that you contribute, like $3 or $7 a month or something. I've been a subscriber for a long time. Today, I noticed at the bottom of one of her emails that it said like, hey, thanks so much. And hey, if you need to unsubscribe, not a problem. I know things change from time to time, and here's how you do that. It was just like very clear. And I was like, God, is she just going to let me unsubscribe? So I clicked on the thing, and it's just like, hey, cool. Thanks so much for supporting my work as long as you did. And you're going to get an email, and you just, follow the directions and blah. I was like, I really respect that. So I really do. Yeah. And I also know that a level of frustration I felt trying to cancel things that I couldn't cancel easily or unsubscribe to. So I really love her work. It's kind of a liberal arts compendium of art and literature and poetry and commentary, like social commentary. Gorgeous. And she's just a beautiful human creating beautiful work that benefits people, and particularly creatives of all kinds. That's one I just love.
I love that you brought that up. I adore her. She writes with just such a delicate and intricate way of viewing. And then her ability, because she's so vastly read, to connect. Yes. So-and-so talks about it in this way. And then so-and-so, and this is through the ages, all different writers.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, if I
Socrates
could
to
be,
Sylvia Plath,
yes, exactly. I'm like, if I could be you, like, yes, I freaking love that. That is such a beautiful, beautiful idea. Other resources, anything else come to
Mm.
mind?
Oh my gosh, there are so
I mean, there's a
many.
million.
But yeah, I mean, here's a resource that I would say a lot of people probably are going to laugh about this, but like I dig into my own writing. Not like, I'm not saying like go read my book. I go back and read things that I wrote a long time ago as a way of seeing how far I've come. So I look at the things I wrote when I was, say, 20 or 30, and I see evidence of my growth and evolution as a human being.
Yes.
And this gives me hope in the moments where I'm feeling strung out and weird in my present day life. I find that is just helpful. There's certainly lots of other resources that I think are really useful. I could talk about my friend Brian Johnson's Heroic platform.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people love. It's really, it's pretty affordable. It's accessible, and it's way more yang energy than I feel like works in my daily life. But the resources in his coffers are terrific. Summaries of books, really thoughtful evaluations of Stoic philosophy, all the way to present day marketing. Like he's got a pretty, like, he's the Maria Popova of a yang universe, you know?
Yes.
And there's an app,
yeah, that's true.
and you hit goals. And I would say, like, I often recommend that to people whose energy is more yang, or who are excited to have that kind of yang energy going on. But for me right now in my life, I am in a yin mode. And a part of that is I think just part of it might be my gender, part of it might be my life stage, part of it might just be my appetite after everything that you and I have been through
All the
these
stuff.
past few
Yeah.
years. I'm more interested in these kind of gentler, softer approaches. So those are where I'm heading, and also reflective. I think one thing about looking at what's around you as a resource, rather than always acquiring a new thing, is it's less stuff and clutter in my life. And it's like recycling resources, upcycling resources. Yes. I just was writing my email newsletter today about the problem of new and not necessarily improved. And more not necessarily being better. So those are some of the things that I like the best. Yeah.
Love it. So the B in herb stands for beliefs. Beliefs could be your worldview, your perspective, the way in which you see things. Which beliefs have really been the ones that have maybe especially guided you through those more challenging times?
Yeah. One is that nature's wisdom is vastly greater than ours. You can learn almost anything you need to know by taking a really close look at nature and what's connected in nature and how those systems in nature work.
Yeah.
I live on a farm. I've grown up on a farm. I use material from nature all the time in my work. And when I'm lost and hopeless and freaked out, being in nature and looking at how nature works and learning from nature is always super helpful for me. I believe nature has the answers, and we just have tended to not listen or watch very carefully to them.
Right.
Another belief I have is that there are unseen forces in the world, including natural forces, but not limited to those, that we don't yet understand or know how to explain with science, but that I believe at some point advanced science will better understand. I think this is proven out historically. Like a lot of what we thought was scientifically true in the 1800s turned out we had all that wrong. And Einstein, very famously said, like, there's a lot of this stuff that isn't making sense. The quantum, there's another version beyond quantum, the quantum that we're going to get to. So I try to stay in, like, live in the mystery and accept that we have to live in the questions, and remember to have the humility that we don't have all the answers. Whatever I think might be right and or wrong, I don't know. I mean, I just try to kind of keep
Might
an
not
open
be.
mind. Might not be. And the third belief, I guess, is the one that we talked about earlier, that the way we are living this moment in history is unprecedented, and that trying to, live a healthy, happy life in the context of the conditions and the uncertainty that we're living in is the challenge of the moment. And I think it can be an art form. I don't think it has to be a slog or miserable or a losing battle. I really feel like we're being given an opportunity to relearn how to live successfully in the face of conditions that we have created, human beings have created, that are not working out well for us. We're an early experiment, and I think we're learning a lot from our mistakes. And I think we're also seeing new opportunities to, I won't say return to a way of living, because there's no going back, but I think to find our way to a sustainable, regenerative, joyful way of living that is vastly more beneficial to more life forms than the way that we're living now. And I just think more fun. I'm a big fan of like, let it
Yes.
be fun. Let it be fun.
Absolutely.
So that's what my Healthy Deviant work, I think, is really centered in some combination of those beliefs that there's a better way of living and we're going to figure it out together.
Gorgeous. So Pilar, we could talk about 40,000 other million things for the next like 8 hours, but
more isn't necessarily better.
This is true. You already said this. If our audience is like, hey, she sounds amazing, I would love to learn more, I'd love to follow her stuff, where would you like them to go?
Ooh, well, I think the easiest place to send people is healthydeviant.com, which is the site that's most associated with my book and my current work. I'd encourage people to check out the Are You a Healthy Deviant quiz, partially because it gives you a better sense of what Healthy Deviants might be about, and it might not be what you're thinking. It's like a 20-question quiz, takes 2 minutes. That's available at the site. There's also a free preview of my book at the site, both the Audible audiobook and the print book. I try to give a lot of stuff away. You're probably not surprised by now. I give a lot of stuff away for free.
I'm not surprised.
But there is also a programs page that has, hilariously, not all of my programs, but some of my programs are there that include things like my 14-day Healthy Deviant adventure, my Refine Your Life workshop series, my Healthy Deviant You experience. I will say that's the one that's kicking off next. Registration for that is open in August. I think the waiting list page is up now. You can find that through the programs page. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to explore for people that are resonating with the idea of like, yeah, I actually do want to learn a better way of living. I actually do want to figure out how to meet the challenges of the moment in a way that is different than the ones I've been told, because I think so many of those prescriptions are just losing battles. They create more trouble. That's kicking off again in September. I've open cohorts just a couple times a year, and I would really welcome people to check that out and see if it works for them. I open up a sneak preview of it so people can see kind of what the core content is about, what the progress pathway looks like. It's 4 phases, like 4 little badges you can earn, but who cares about badges? Because you don't need more badges, but they're here.
But people love them, Pilar.
They actually are really fun. And it all starts with this one, Start Where You Are, which is about amplified awareness and the things we're talking about today. Because if you're not aware of what's working for you and what's breaking you down, it's really tough to make good decisions. And a lot of folks, I think, today don't have time or energy or mental space to even do that evaluation. We're too busy going for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So those are pathways into my work. I'm also on social media. You can check out the podcast, The Living Experiment, which is on any podcast platform. And whatever works for you, whether you like to connect personally in the mode of like, let's just check in and chit chat. I'm around. If you want to delve deep, you can do that too.
Perfect. Well, I will link to all those things. If you're watching this on YouTube, the links will be down below. If you're listening to the podcast, you can find everything at lucra.com in the show notes for this episode. Pilar, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really fun talking to you. I feel like I found a little soul sister.
Totally. Thanks ever so much for listening. Whenever you're ready, here are 3 ways I can help you create a more lucrative life. 1, subscribe for free to my lucrative newsletter for weekly insights on business, money, and mindset. 2, join Club Lucra to connect with a like-minded community so that you don't have to go it alone. 3, work with me one-on-one to chart the course from where you are to where you want to be. Everything you need is at lucra.com. That's lucra.com. Lucra, where wealth equals well-being.